That night, Vasper brought their bed out to the beach, just far enough to avoid the surf's reach. Chanty laughed at Vasper's idea of sleeping outside, having literally moved the entire bed out. The sky was so clear, the stars breathtaking to behold. There. The bed is ready. It's just us on this island, so don't worry, Vasper said with a smile. He stood by the bed, admiring the setup. Though Chanty found it hard to believe, she was charmed by Vasper's idea. The sound of the waves and the cool breeze made it even more enticing. We'll sleep here so we can watch the sunrise in the morning. It's beautiful here, one of the reasons I bought this place, Vasper added, embracing Chanty before they both tumbled onto the bed. They giggled as they softly landed, the bed's softness cradling them. Their laughter turned to gentle kisses. I love you, Vasper whispered. He gazed into her eyes, his face illuminated by the light from the balcony and surrounding house. The happiness in Chanty's heart was indescribable at that moment. She wished this feeling, this moment with Vasper, would never end. How I wish I had the power to stop time, Vasper murmured, holding her close, gazing into her eyes and at her lips. Chanty nestled into his arms, feeling the cool breeze against her skin, especially since her skirt was so short. Vasper pulled up the blanket, covering them both, holding her tightly with a love-filled embrace, the kind she longed to last forever. She hadn't expected this kind of fate in her life, but how long would she and Vasper be like this? She wondered about their situation, the future of their love. What if Vasper's family, especially his father, who only cared about his ambition for immortality, interfered? And Laika, trying to take her away from Vasper's father? What would happen if she fell into his father's hands? What about David and the others protecting her? How could she balance her life in the business world if she had to constantly hide? Vasper noticed the depth in her eyes, lost in thought. He brought her back with a passionate kiss, to which she responded just as deeply. As they parted, Vasper smiled. What are you thinking about? May I know? He asked, his deep, tempting voice a siren call. She didn't answer, instead tracing her fingers over Vasper's lips, eyes, nose, and cheeks, still in disbelief that the man holding her was truly hers. She smiled when Vasper gently bit her finger as it reached his mouth. She feigned pain, but she was grinning. That small reaction had a significant effect on Vasper, his body heating up. He kissed her deeply, a mix of tenderness and fervor, lightly biting her lips. I can never get enough of you, Vasper whispered amid their kisses. I love you so much, he added. Their laughter and kisses continued under the star-filled sky, the sound of the waves and the breeze their backdrop. It was the love of two souls, unaware of what the future held, from two different worlds. Can I ask you something? Chanty asked seriously. Vasper smiled and nodded. What will happen if your father catches me? Vasper's expression changed. He became serious. He looked up at the sky for a few seconds before speaking. That won't happen. I will make sure he doesn't get you, Vasper said, looking back into her eyes. 8 of us are watching over you, he added with a smile. Chanty. Since our paths crossed, one thing has been clear to me. I don't want to live in this world without you. There was a hint of sadness in his voice, and the pain was evident in Vasper's eyes. Chanty couldn't find words to respond to what she heard. Vasper held her cheek gently. You are my life, Chanty, he continued. But what if one day, your father really does take me? He's powerful, Vasper, and so is Laika. It's not impossible, she said, struggling to voice her fears. She couldn't even imagine what would happen. Vasper's eyes were serious, mixed with sadness. I will do everything to get you back, even if it costs me my life, he replied, his tone sending shivers to her body as he hugged her tightly. That's why it's important for you to learn how to use the Sword of Destiny when you get it. You have an advantage over Alexander Mondragon. You are his most beloved yet feared. Only you can defeat him, Chanty, Vasper said, his voice trailing off. He turned and looked into the distance, understanding what she wanted to say. Tomorrow, we'll practice, he said. As I told you before, you'll practice blindfolded. I've seen how you practice with Lewis. Vasper smiled as he spoke. Do you have a sword here? Chanty asked curiously, and Vasper nodded, looking at her. When did you start having feelings for me? She asked, embarrassed but curious. Vasper smiled mischievously, his eyes shining. When I saw you riding that white stallion in the forest, he whispered. Chanty felt butterflies in her stomach. She tried not to show how thrilled she was by his words and looked at his lips instead of his eyes to avoid revealing her emotions. But Vasper lifted her chin. That time, my world stopped. You are the most beautiful woman I've ever seen in my life, he said. Her excitement grew even more at his words. Many had told her similar things, but it felt different coming from Vasper. She couldn't speak. She recalled their first meeting. You had no manners back then. You kissed me without warning. You were so rude, Chanty said, almost complaining. Vasper seemed amused by her reaction, smiling and chuckling softly. If Vasper only knew how his laughter and smile drove her crazy. She thought. You were my first kiss, she whispered, enjoying the change in Vasper's expression. He kissed her passionately. I know, he said between kisses. I'm the devil, right? And the devil doesn't ask for permission to kiss who he wants, Vasper joked, making her laugh. She lightly slapped him, and they both laughed. Aren't you curious when I started liking you? Chanty asked, smiling. I already know. You couldn't sleep after I kissed you. You kept thinking about me, he said, making her blush deeply. She felt both cold and hot from embarrassment. She was stunned by Vasper's straightforwardness, even though it was true. He saw her reaction and kissed her again, repeatedly whispering I love you. Remember when I took your memories? That's how I know. Besides, we feel the same way. There's not a night when I don't think about you, Chanty. Not a day when you're not on my mind, Vasper said, tracing her nose, eyes, cheeks, and hair with his fingers. But now, I won't mess with your memories unless you want to share them with me, Vasper added. In 6 days, we'll return you to David, but I'll take you out for practice here. Vasper was serious. Chanty, when Alexander Mondragon attacks, you won't see him. He's almost invisible. We're nothing compared to him. But he knows you're the only one who can defeat him. Chanty felt a chill run through her. How could she defeat Alexander? She didn't even have any powers. Vasper noticed her reaction. Don't be afraid. Alexander is the one who's scared of you. That's why he's desperate to find you first. He doesn't want you to get ahead of him, Vasper said. But Vasper, he's your father. Chanty said, looking at him. Vasper became serious. Yes, he's my father, but we're not like your family, Chanty. Our family isn't bound by love, we're bound by loyalty. If Alexander knew about our relationship, he would curse me. He might even erase me from his path. I'd be a traitor to our family. Chanty felt a chill from his words. Power is all that matters to him. Lyca manages his connections in the outer world. As David said, he has ties everywhere, manipulating things for his benefit. Did you notice your father never gave you mobile phones? So you couldn't be traced. You never went to a traditional school. Don Lorenzo protected you well, but Lyca found out. On the night your mansion burned, I was there, but you were gone. You escaped with David. Lyca thought you perished in the fire, but I told her you were alive, Vasper explained, his eyes filled with sorrow. I'm so sorry we hadn't met then. I convinced Lyca you were alive, and because of David, I found his hideout. That's how we met, but it was too late. Lyca was already searching for you. Now, the best I can do is teach you how to use the sword and defend yourself against Alexander, Vasper said. Chanty couldn't speak as she listened to Vasper recount his experiences. She remembered her father and started crying again. Vasper saw her sadness and hugged her tightly. I'm so sorry, Chanty. If I could change the past, I would. It's my fault Lyca is after you. Vasper kissed her face, trying to comfort her. She didn't speak. I'm so stupid, right? So damn stupid, Vasper said, regret clear in his voice. I just miss my father and Nanny, Vasper, she whispered. Vasper hugged her tightly. Oh, I never want to see you cry. I'm so sorry, he said, kissing her again until she calmed down. Her pillow was soaked with tears. The sound of the waves and the clarity of the stars seemed to soothe her, almost like they were helping to silence her sobs. Vasper never let go of her, holding her as they gazed at the sky. They continued talking while hugging, feeling the coldness. Chanty snuggled closer to Vasper, and he hugged her tightly. Chanty started to feel sleepy and eventually fell asleep in Vasper's arms, who watched her affectionately for a few minutes before he too fell asleep. Chanty woke up to the gentle kiss on her lips. Vasper's soft and warm lips roused her, and she murmured in response. As she opened her eyes, she saw Vasper smiling at her. Good morning. It's almost here, Vasper said, gesturing towards the sea. Chanty knew what he meant, the sunrise they were waiting for. She thought it must be dawn already. Good morning, she replied, smiling as she looked at where Vasper was gazing. She was still nestled in Vasper's arms, and they continued to hug each other. They watched as the sky gradually changed colors, and her heart raced with excitement. They shared another kiss as the sky slowly brightened, revealing the vastness of the sea. Chanty felt speechless at the sight, witnessing a magical moment with Vasper. As the light grew stronger, making it impossible to gaze directly at the sun, they suddenly found themselves back in their room, lying in bed. Chanty gasped at the sudden change of location. Vasper just smiled. Isn't the sunrise beautiful here? And on the other side of the island, we can watch the sunset. We'll go there later, Vasper said with a small excitement in his voice. Chanty just looked at Vasper's face as he spoke to her. She smiled, realizing Vasper appreciated even the small things like sunrises and sunsets. These moments now held more significance for her, especially when shared with Vasper. She wished their life could always be this simple and uncomplicated. That day, they got out of bed together and had coffee. Although they didn't have a coffee machine, the coffee Vasper made tasted better than any she had ever had. While they drank their coffee, Vasper asked her to make a list of the items she wanted. They couldn't use gadgets or shop online because Vasper wanted to avoid being traced. She handed Vasper the list, and within seconds, he teleported. He returned a few minutes later, assuring her that everything was taken care of, including some household items like a washing machine and a coffee machine. Vasper, where do we get our power from? I don't see any power lines or solar panels here, she asked, curious. Vasper smiled at her question. Like the crystals David uses in his forest villa, we have them here too, surrounding the island to prevent trespassing except for us two. Chanty was amazed by what she learned. Don't be surprised, it's from the inner world, not available in the outer world. I was able to enter David's property because I have something similar to his, Vasper explained, and Chanty nodded, still in awe. Later that day, they cooked breakfast together, heating up pizza and making a pasta dish, enjoying their meal happily. After breakfast, Chanty went to her room to shower and change. She ended up wearing a halter mini dress in yellow and green crochet with open sides, highlighting her figure. She smiled as she looked at herself in the mirror, wondering who had chosen such outfits for her. She let her long hair hang loose and left the room. Not finding Vasper in the living room, she remembered their laundry. She gathered the clothes but couldn't find Vasper's. She searched the room, kitchen, outdoor shower, and bathroom but found nothing. She saw the sword leaning against the wall near the corner. This must be the sword Vasper mentioned, she thought. She picked it up and admired its lightweight and simple design. It was taller than the ones she and Louis used. Where is Vasper? She wondered. She went outside to the beach, practicing with the sword. Her hair kept getting in the way, so she paused to tie it up. Chanty looked graceful wielding the sword, her beauty and elegance shining through. She didn't notice Vasper watching her from the doorway, smiling. When she got tired and was about to return to the house, she saw Vasper grinning at her with a thumbs up. She waited for him to approach, eager to practice together. Vasper brought another sword and came out, his eyes scanning her figure, clearly admiring her. He hugged and kissed her passionately. After their embrace, they positioned themselves to practice, Vasper's face turning serious. "Okay, Chanty, show me what you got," Vasper said. Chanty attacked first, but Vasper disappeared from his spot, suddenly reappearing behind her. She gasped at the unexpected move. She turned, but Vasper was gone again, moving too quickly for her to follow. He kept vanishing and reappearing until he finally stood in front of her, grabbed her sword, and threw both swords away. Vasper lifted her, and she laughed in surprise. They teleported to the bedroom, tumbling onto the bed together. Chanty laughed heartily at Vasper's antics, thinking they were about to practice. Vasper laughed too, showering her with kisses on her lips and neck as they lay on the bed. He was on top of her, and they stared into each other's eyes, the desire and longing returning to their gazes. Their bodies heated up with the shared intensity. Vasper's kisses and embraces grew hotter, and Chanty felt the same fiery passion. They were both undressed, losing themselves in the pleasure and heightened sensations. Their groans and moans filled the house as they breathed heavily. Vasper's lips and tongue worshipped every inch of Chanty's body that bring her into the edge of pleasure. After they both relaxed, Vasper remained on top of her, his head nestled in her neck. "You teach me well." "I learned a lot about handling the sword," Chanty teased, and Vasper laughed at her remark. Vasper looked into her eyes, mischievous smile on his lips. "I'm weak. Who could resist your beauty? Your figure alone distracts me, I can't focus." "I'm defeated, from the start," Vasper whispered with a grin, and they both laughed. "I love you, Chanty," Vasper said, kissing her repeatedly. "I love you too, Vasper," Chanty replied, holding him close. They stayed in each other's arms for several more minutes, cherishing the warmth and closeness, before deciding to go back outside for more practice. They stepped out to the beach, feeling the cool sand beneath their feet and the gentle breeze against their skin. Vasper picked up the swords and handed one to Chanty. "Let's take it slow," Vasper suggested with a soft smile. Chanty nodded, her eyes filled with affection as they faced each other. Vasper moved with deliberate grace, his eyes never leaving Chanty's. She mirrored his movements, their swords gliding smoothly. Each step and swing was a dance, a shared rhythm that connected them even more deeply. Vasper's touches were gentle yet firm, guiding her, and each time their bodies brushed against each other, the air seemed to sizzle with a mix of romance and intensity. Chanty's heart raced, not just from the practice but from the closeness, the way Vasper's eyes held hers with a promise of love and protection. They paused frequently, Vasper taking her hands, adjusting her grip, and each correction felt like an intimate gesture. He'd lean in close, his breath warm on her skin, whispering encouragement, and then they'd resume their dance with the swords. And Vasper took a piece of cloth from his pocket and showed it to Chanty. He gestured for her to be blindfolded, and he smiled. She waited for Vasper to hand her the cloth to cover her eyes. But Vasper approached her, looked into her eyes, and said, "Can you find me?" He kissed her lips with deep passion, both of them smiling sweetly when their lips parted. "This man is unbelievably attractive," Chanty thought as she gazed at Vasper's face, especially when he smiled. Vasper folded the cloth several times and then covered Chanty's eyes. She could see nothing but darkness and could only hear the distant sound of waves. Once her eyes were covered, she felt a tight embrace and another kiss from Vasper, making her grin at his actions. She positioned herself and listened to her surroundings. "Okay, find me," Vasper said, his voice coming from her right. She quickly reached out her hand but found nothing. "Not with your hand, Chanty." "Use your sword," Vasper said, his voice serious. But she hesitated, not wanting to accidentally hurt Vasper with the sword. She stopped for a moment. Then the sword she was holding clanged, struck by Vasper's sword. She listened again, but it was difficult with the noise of the waves and the sounds of the birds. Suddenly, something pressed against her lips. It was Vasper's lips, but when she reached out, she caught nothing. "Here I am," his voice came from behind her. She turned abruptly but still caught nothing. Vasper struck her sword again, and she couldn't tell how long she struggled to hear and catch Vasper using only his voice. Using her hearing sense, she realized it was amusing because Vasper always managed to kiss her without being caught when she tried to grab him. until she finally removed her blindfold. She was very disappointed with herself, but Vasper looked amused as he gazed at her. He giggled while greeting her with a hug and a kiss. "It's okay. It's your first time. This is just practice, right? Practice makes perfect. Tonight, it'll be better to practice because the environment will be calmer and the weather cooler." By that time, it was almost noon, and the sun's rays were harsh on the skin. Vasper lifted her, and in seconds, they were in the living room. He placed her on the sofa, took her sword, and leaned it against the side. She laughed at what Vasper was doing. She felt like a child. "Okay, relax there. What do you want for lunch? Any specific request? So I can get it or cook if we have the ingredients available. I did some grocery shopping earlier, and your stuff is in the bedroom. Check it out," Vasper added. "Surprise me, anything you cook is delicious," Chanty said with a smile, encouraging Vasper. "Okay. So, I'll cook now, okay?" he replied. "Can I help?" "I want to see how you cook," she said, and Vasper nodded with a sweet smile. They both went to the kitchen, and Vasper prepared their cooking utensils. She was amazed at how suddenly the kitchen was filled with equipment. There was a coffee machine, a washing machine, and many other appliances, with all the cabinets full. "How did you do this so quickly?" "Our kitchen is almost complete," she said, looking around. Vasper smiled at her reaction. "Nothing is impossible for me," Vasper said with a bit of humor in his voice, "and this will be our permanent hideout, Chanty. Here, no one really knows, we're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. It's not a route for ships. Unless they intentionally come here. And people with powers like mine, teleportation," Vasper added. Chanty was astonished at what she learned. They were in the middle of the Pacific Ocean? And I erased this island from the world map. So, anyone searching won't find this on the world map. That's our way of ensuring privacy, Vasper continued. Chanty could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You erased this island from the world map?" she emphasized, astonished at the idea. "Yes, it's not new to us, but to you, it's something you didn't know. Do you know about the inner world?" "No, because it's not on your world map. Only we who live in the inner world know the entire map of this planet," Vasper said while attending to the ingredients and explaining to Chanty. "Moreover, 2 groups are looking for us, on my side, my family, on your side, it's David and his people. They've been looking for you. I'm sorry, but David is very angry with me. In fact, all of them are. They're at Jake's mansion right now, worried sick about you," Vasper said, shocking Chanty further. "Vasper, I don't want you to always fight with David and his people. You're both important to me. I don't want you to keep fighting," Chanty said, her voice full of concern. Vasper looked at her and smiled. "If it were up to me, I wouldn't want to return you to them, but I don't want you to be alone here when I'm away. Besides, I can't neglect my duties, they'd be suspicious. I would find it impossible to know their plans. I hope you understand that what I'm doing is for both of us, so we can be together for a long time," Vasper said, his eyes showing sincerity. "And another thing. I want the day to come when you don't need those 7 guys anymore. I can't help but feel jealous when you're with them, Chanty. They're all handsome men with strict protocols, but that doesn't mean they can't fall for you," Vasper complained, and Chanty was amused by his reaction. "He doesn't know about Jacob has already expressed feelings for her. Vasper doesn't know about Jacob yet." Chanty thought, "If I fell in love with you, why wouldn't they?" Vasper said, looking into her eyes, honestly expressing his feelings. Chanty couldn't believe how straightforward Vasper was about his feelings. She approached Vasper and kissed him deeply on the lips. "Vasper, you're the only man I've ever loved like this. That's what's important. It doesn't matter who else likes me, what matters is my feelings for you. You're the only one who owns my heart. That's the only thing that matters, nothing else," she whispered, and Vasper was mesmerized, staring into her eyes as if hypnotized by her actions. As they kissed deeply and passionately, within seconds, they were back in the bedroom, sharing their heated love once more. The entire house echoed with their moans and groans of love, longing, and deeply pleasurable moments of intimacy. Their little island paradise was ablaze with the heat of their passion, which they shared. That moment seemed endless, as if they would never part on the bed, until Chanty herself pulled Vasper to stand up. Vasper stood up, and he helped Chanty put her halter dress back on. Chanty laughed because Vasper always held her panties for her to put back on. As they left the room, Vasper gently bit Chanty's lips playfully. They walked out of the room together to continue their cooking. They were both laughing as they left the room. Suddenly, they were both startled to see Jake standing in the doorway. It felt like cold water was poured over Chanty when she saw Jake. Jake's stance was commanding and strong, like that of a warrior. He wore a black shirt, tight tattered pants, and leather boots. He had a bow and arrow on his back, and his hair was in a man bun, accentuating his strikingly handsome appearance. But Jake's eyes were unreadable, serious and cold as he looked at Chanty and Vasper holding hands. Vasper was only in shorts, and Chanty looked sexy in her halter dress. Jake looked her up and down, making her feel even more embarrassed. Vasper was also surprised because he didn't expect Jake to find them there, but it wasn't impossible in his mind. "Jake, how did you find us here?" Chanty asked, her voice trembling. Vasper hugged her from the side, and Jake's eyes shifted to Vasper's hands on Chanty's waist. Vasper's face was calm, but the tension between them was palpable, knowing any slight provocation could lead to a fight. Chanty couldn't read Jake's expression. "Your timing is perfect, Jake. Chanty and I were just about to cook lunch. Join us for lunch here at our place." "Welcome, you are our first guest," Vasper said in a relaxed tone. Chanty noticed a change in Jake's expression. "Vasper, David didn't agree to you taking Chanty. You just took her without his permission," Jake said calmly, but there was an edge to his voice. He's emphasizing every word. Vasper's demeanor turned serious. "I don't need David's permission to take Chanty whenever I want, Jake." "She's mine," Vasper replied coldly but fiercely, staring Jake down with intensity. They locked eyes, neither of them blinking, and Chanty felt the tension building up, which she feared. "Jake, don't worry, I'm okay here. In 5 days, I'll return to your mansion." Chanty stuttered, trying to stay calm even though she was almost suffocating from the anxiety she felt. She didn't want either of them to get hurt. "I don't want you two to fight again, Jake, Vasper. Please, just talk it out without using your powers or strength, or I might faint again and never wake up. Promise." Chanty pleaded, her voice trembling, and tears welling up. Both Vasper and Jake looked at her. Vasper reacted quickly, pulling her into a tight embrace and kissing her deeply with compassion and love, ignoring Jake's glaring eyes. When their lips parted, Chanty saw Jake's eyes. Jake turned around and walked out to the balcony. Vasper watched Jake's movements and then pulled Chanty towards the kitchen. "Let's finish cooking so we can have lunch. We have a guest, after all," Vasper said, aware that Jake could hear him. Chanty hesitated to leave Jake on the balcony, so she excused herself briefly to let Jake know they were finishing cooking. Despite the tension, Vasper and Chanty continued cooking. Vasper remained alert, knowing Jake was listening outside. As they cooked, Vasper pulled Chanty into another deep kiss, only stopping when they heard a noise outside. They paused, waiting to see what caused the noise. "I love you," Vasper whispered to Chanty, intended only for her ears. "I love you too, Vasper," Chanty replied. "I'll just get a bathrobe," Vasper said, looking at what Chanty was wearing. "Oh," Chanty replied, realizing her outfit. "I'll change, my things are in the room," Chanty said as she walked towards the room, but Vasper stopped her, hugging her as they moved to the room together. She rummaged through her suitcase, found a matching set of joggers, and started changing. Vasper helped her out of her halter dress, but before she could fully change, he started kissing her passionately again. They laughed as they changed and then returned to the kitchen together. Their dish was almost ready, and Chanty helped prepare the table. She went outside and saw the table on the balcony had been overturned, and Jake was staring at her intently. "Sorry, the table broke." Better than breaking Vasper's face, Jake said. Chanty was stunned by what she heard and forced herself to stay calm. Ah, Jake. Please. I hope you understand, I'm happy you're here. But I don't want you to fight in front of me. Please, Chanty pleaded, her voice shaking. Jake's expression showed pain, but he tried to keep his composure. Really? You're happy I'm here? Or are you disappointed because I interrupted your happy moment? Jake said, looking into Shanta's eyes, his voice edged with bitterness. Chanty was speechless, unable to believe what Jake had just said. Jake? What do you mean? Do you think I'm pretending? I'm genuinely happy to see you, Jake, but I'm scared you two will fight in front of me. That's how I truly feel, Shanta said, on the verge of tears, hurt by Jake's words. Jake looked at her without expression, an expert at hiding his feelings. Shanta turned back to the kitchen, her heart heavy, trying to suppress her emotions. Vasper met her, knowing what had happened outside, having heard everything. Despite the tension, they served lunch in the living room using the center table since the balcony table was broken. They called Jake, but he didn't come. He said he was already full. Chanty and Vasper ate the meal they prepared, but for Chanty, the food seemed tasteless despite knowing it was delicious. The tension among the three was palpable, making her feel like they could burst into flames at any moment. Vasper noticed Jake's movements. He suppressed his anger towards Jake, trying to remain calm for Shanta's sake. After lunch, Chanty and Vasper cleaned up and went outside to the beach. They didn't see Jake outside, but Vasper felt his presence. He's just around, I can feel his presence, Vasper said. They walked along the beach, holding hands, and Vasper planned to show Shanta the entire island. They walked along the white sandy shore, and Shanta marveled at the island's beauty in different parts. In a small forest in the middle of the island, they found a large solitary tree. The water looked inviting, making them want to dive in. Let's swim, Vasper, Shanta suggested, and Vasper smiled and nodded. Sure. Without hesitation, Shanta took off her clothes, leaving her underwear on, and threw her clothes into the sand. Vasper did the same, wearing only his shorts. He lifted Chanty and ran towards the water, both of them laughing. They splashed into the water and started kissing deeply again. The water felt wonderful, a mix of warm and cool temperatures. The water feels great, Chanty exclaimed, happily facing Vasper. Vasper cupped her face and traced her lips with his thumb. I love you so much, I don't know how to live without you, Chanty, Vasper whispered in his deep, rasping voice. Chanty responded with a sweet kiss. They started kissing passionately again, from her lips down to her neck, his lips and tongue leaving a trail of fiery kisses. He removed Shanta's bra and tossed it onto the sand, his lips worshipping her breasts, his hands caressing her body. Their moans and groans mixed with the sound of the waves crashing on the shore. They didn't care about the distant eyes watching them. Jake watched from afar, his heart shattered. The pain he felt was indescribable, like a knife twisting in his chest, making it hard for him to breathe. His love for Chanty only deepened instead of diminishing. He regretted coming to the island. His soul felt broken by what he saw and heard. All he could feel was pain, torturous pain. Tears rolled down his cheeks silently. He didn't notice that the rock he was leaning on was crumbling under the pressure of his grip. There he let out his emotions. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the beach, Vasper led Chanty to a spot where they could watch the horizon. Side by side, watching the sky change colors. It's even more beautiful than the sunrise, Chanty whispered, leaning her head on Vasper's shoulder. Especially with you here, Vasper replied softly, wrapping an arm around her. They sat there, watching the sunset in silence, feeling the peace and connection between them, making this simple, beautiful moment one of the most meaningful they had ever shared. It was dark when Chanty and Vasper returned home. The lights around and inside the house were already on, casting a warm glow in the cool night air. Chanty, curious if Jake had left, glanced at Vasper. Understanding her silent question, Vasper responded, he's still here, just around, watching, his voice serious and steady. Chanty remained silent, contemplating. Can we practice again? Blindfolded? She asked softly. Vasper's lips curved into a smile. Sure, aren't you tired? He asked gently. Chanty shook her head, her determination unwavering. Vasper retrieved the sword and the blindfold, and they walked together to the edge of the beach. The sound of the waves provided a rhythmic backdrop. Vasper tied the cloth over Shanta's eyes, but before letting her go, he kissed her tenderly, their lips lingering for a moment. From behind a tree, Jake emerged, his presence adding a cold tension to the atmosphere. His eyes locked onto Chanty, but Vasper ignored his intense gaze, focusing instead. Chanty prepared herself, standing firm and listening intently. She heard various noises and instinctively followed them with her hands. Vasper tapped her sword gently. Use the sword, not your hands. Don't worry if you wound me, I heal quickly, he reassured her, his voice calm and encouraging. He approached again, removed her blindfold, and kissed her on the lips once more, this time more passionately. Chanty felt her heart race, but she stayed focused. Chanty, listen. Don't hesitate to strike with your sword, Vasper instructed. Watch this. He cut his palm, and Chanty gasped in shock. Vasper, no, she cried, but Vasper's eyes remained serious. Chanty watched in awe as his wound closed quickly, leaving no trace. See? I can self-heal. Don't hesitate. Focus, concentrate, then attack. He blindfolded her again. Chanty concentrated, distinguishing the sounds Vasper made from the crashing waves. Her hearing sharpened, and when Vasper removed the blindfold, she smiled sweetly, feeling a small sense of accomplishment. Vasper greeted her with a tight embrace and tender kisses, his lips lingering on hers, making her heart flutter. As they embraced, Chanty noticed Jake standing by the tree, his expression cold and detached. Suddenly, Jake teleported in front of them. Can I borrow your sword, Chanty? He asked, his voice calm but challenging. Vasper's gaze turned serious as he looked at Jake. Huh. Sure, Chanty replied, feeling a bit nervous about Jake's intentions. Don't worry, we're just practicing. Vasper is very skilled with a sword, Jake said calmly, his eyes filled with determination and challenge. Chanty looked at Vasper, who was studying Jake's movements intently. Vasper signaled Chanty to give the sword to Jake. She handed the sword to Jake, who suddenly attacked Vasper without warning. Chanty was startled by the skill and speed of both men. Each time Jake struck, Vasper blocked it. Their movements were so fast, the sound of their swords clashing blended with the waves. Chanty could barely see their movements, only flashes of metal reflecting the lights. As the duel continued, the sand beneath their feet deepened from their intense movements. Chanty watched in awe and fear as Jake was thrown against the tree, causing it to fall from the impact. She screamed, Vasper. Jake. Is this still practice? It looks real. Jake stood up as if nothing had happened, while Vasper remained standing, strikingly attractive in his fighting stance. Jake attacked again. Chanty could hear their strikes but couldn't follow their speed. She saw only flashes of the swords reflecting the lights. She was amazed and scared that the practice might turn into a real fight. They fought from the water back to the sand. It seemed impossible what she was seeing. She was far from their skill level. The sound of the swords dominated everything else. When the fight ended, they were both thrown far apart, but still standing alertly. Chanty noticed the sharp looks they gave each other, serious and deadly. Vasper's sword broke in half. The broken piece fell from his hand, and blood dripped from his finger. Chanty saw the small stream of blood from Vasper's hand, and both Vasper and Jake were breathing heavily, their eyes locked in intense stares. Jake smiled sardonically when Vasper's sword broke. Chanty ran to Vasper, panicking at the sight of his bleeding hand. Vasper, your hand, she cried. Vasper's eyes moved from Jake to Chanty. Chanty took Vasper's hand, and Jake's stare became even more intense. He stood like a statue watching them. Such a small wound, Chanty. Are you worried? Jake said sarcastically. Chanty didn't turn to him. Don't worry, it's just a scratch. The sword broke, not from Jake's hit, Vasper said pointedly, and Jake understood the hint. But Vasper froze when Chanty put his wounded finger in her mouth, gently sucking the blood to clean it. She didn't know the effect this would have on Vasper. He stared at her with open mouth, feeling the warmth of her tongue, making his body heat up even more. Oops. Chanty realized what she was doing too late. Vasper hugged her tightly and kissed her deeply. Chanty giggled at what happened. They both giggled while kissing, ignoring Jake, who watched the entire scene. Jake disappeared suddenly, but they didn't care. They ended up in bed, continuing their heated embrace. Despite their intense passion, Vasper controlled himself, respecting Chanty's virginity. He worshipped her body with kisses and touches, but never crossed that final line. He maintained his care for her purity even as his desire burned hot.